The millionaire didn't expect the cleaning lady to show up, but she arrived like a star and left everyone speechless. Before we dive into the story, drop in the comments where you're watching from. It's always amazing to see how far these stories reach. And if you're into intense emotional love stories with plenty of twists, hit that subscribe button. That way, you won't miss any upcoming episodes, and you'll help the channel grow and bring more stories just like this to others. The muffled click of heels against marble echoed through the grand glass hall of the Bennett Grand Resort, one of the most luxurious and exclusive venues in Los Angeles. Inside, suited men and women in haute couture toasted with French champagne, surrounded by golden lighting and soft music performed by a string quartet. It was a gala night, reserved only for millionaires, investors, heirs, and that evening in particular, the arrogant. Seated at the center of a majestic table, posture impeccable, was Alexander Bennett. Tall, athletic, in a bespoke suit, his steel blue eyes scanned the room with cold detachment. He projected an image of absolute control. Young for his position, just 33, but carrying the gaze of someone who had already lost far more than money. I bet none of the staff here would dare show up, even if invited. One of the partners scoffed, pouring another glass. Alex raised an eyebrow in boredom and replied sarcastically, "If any of them do show, I'll personally cover the year-end bonus." Amid laughter and taunts, the bet was made. One of the guests, eager to fuel the cruel game, sent a symbolic invitation to some random staff member. No one expected destiny to pick Isabella Martinez. On the other side of the resort, among brooms, cleaning carts, and the sharp scent of disinfectant, Bella scrubbed the floor with determination. Her long brown hair was tied up in a makeshift bun, and she wore a simple blue uniform, faded from use. Her smooth, pale skin hid calluses on her hands, and her deep, honey-brown eyes showed fatigue, but also a spark of strength she tried to conceal. She found the envelope in the locker room, thought it must be a mistake. An invitation with her name, Isabella Martinez, venue, Imperial Gala Hall, 8 p.m. Might be a joke, she murmured. But beneath it, something stirred. She knew it could be a trap, knew she didn't belong in that world. But for once, just once, she wanted to see herself differently. She remembered the simple white dress her neighbor lent her months ago. It fit her sculpted figure she always hid under loose layers. If they're going to laugh at me, let them at least see who I am. At exactly 8 p.m., the hall gleamed even brighter. Alexander stood, poised to make a toast, when the sound of doors opening turned every head. She stepped in. Isabella appeared with calm, confident strides, as if floating. The white dress, without sparkle or ostentation, hugged her curves elegantly. Her hair now flowed loose over her shoulders, and a light lipstick highlighted the charming smile she couldn't hide. It was impossible not to notice her. Silence. The entire hall held its breath. Alex held his glass mid-air, unable to continue. His eyes met hers. A jolt. "Who is she?" someone whispered. "The cleaning lady," another hissed in disdain. But Bella didn't falter. She walked among the guests, head held high, unafraid, unannounced. There was pain behind her eyes, but also pride. She stopped before Alexander. He tried to speak, but she spoke first, voice soft yet firm. "You didn't expect me to come, but here I am." He swallowed hard. Her presence disarmed him. The crowd, which once mocked, now watched her with a mix of discomfort and admiration. "If this was meant to be a joke," she continued, "then maybe I ruined the punchline." And she smiled, not submissively, but from someone who knew her own worth. Alex unconsciously smiled back, not out of arrogance, but from something new and dangerous, a feeling he thought was long dead. That night, it wasn't the dress, nor the boldness, nor the broken silence that impressed the most. It was how she made him feel human again. He, the millionaire. She, the invisible one. But for a moment, they were just two hearts trying to find each other. The hall still buzzed with hushed comments and uneasy glances long after Isabella Martinez dared to cross those doors. She didn't bow, didn't hide. It was impossible to ignore her presence, and even more impossible to forget how, with a single look, she dismantled the most feared CEO on the West Coast. Alexander Bennett still held his glass, as though time had frozen. The light in his eyes didn't come from the chandeliers, but from something he couldn't yet name. When Isabella turned to leave, without another word, Alex took 2 unconscious steps toward her, but didn't follow. He didn't know that this would be only the first of many cracks in his armor. The next morning, the resort awoke in silence. Morning sun began to paint the stained glass windows in golden hues, while the corridors filled again with hurried employees, unseen by guests, yet indispensable to everything running smoothly. Among them was Isabella, in her blue uniform, hair tied back, eyes still marked by a restless night. She was nearing the end of her second consecutive shift when she was instructed to clean one of the executive rooms on the upper floor. It wasn't her usual area, but a co-worker had called in sick, exhausted and with cleaning solution stained. Hands! She pushed the cart and climbed the stairs, trying to stay focused. The pain in her feet was excruciating, but her mother's hospital bill couldn't wait. When she reached the 15th floor, she checked the room number on the sheet. Matched. She knocked gently, heard no answer, and opened the door. That's when she realized. Inside, a massive glass table dominated the center of the room. Around it, 8 men and 2 women in suits looked at her with surprise and disdain. It was a high-level meeting. Papers on the table displayed numbers and charts with million-dollar investment projections. The air conditioning made the room feel colder than necessary. Isabella froze. She wanted to back away, but before she could, one of the female executives spoke. Her voice low and sharp. "You're lost, sweetheart. The laundry is 2 floors down." Contained laughter rippled through the table. One of the men looked at her as if she had dragged dirt into the room. Isabella blushed. The cart beside her rattled. She lowered her gaze, took a deep breath, and said, without looking at anyone, "They told me to clean this room. I thought it was empty." That's when he saw her. Alexander Bennett, seated at the head of the table, observed in silence. He wore a crisp white shirt, no tie, and his dark blonde hair was slightly tousled, as if he had run his hand through it just moments before. He should have been annoyed, should have dismissed the intruder, but he didn't. His eyes couldn't look away from hers. Even through the exhaustion, embarrassment, and stained uniform, she had a dignity that disarmed him. "You can leave a cart outside and come clean after the meeting," he finally said, in a neutral tone, almost kind. The executive stared at him, surprised. It was rare to see him show any form of courtesy, especially to someone in worn-out shoes and with hands roughened by work. Isabella simply nodded, backed out silently, and closed the door carefully. Outside, she leaned against the wall and let out the air she had been holding. Her face felt hot. The shame burned, but deep down, something in her chest beat faster. Not from humiliation, but from having faced that look. From feeling that, for the first time, someone had truly seen her. Inside the room, the silence lasted longer than it should have. Alex glanced at the spreadsheet in front of him, but his mind was trapped in the image of that woman, sweaty, exhausted, but with the most alive eyes he had ever seen. "Let's continue," he said curtly, trying to regain control. But his voice came out softer than usual. While the others returned to discussing numbers, he didn't realize that, in that simple, quiet moment, something inside him had begun to shift. And as Isabella slowly made her way down the floors with her cleaning cart, heart heavy and eyes misty, she had no idea that by mistakenly crossing that door, she had opened one that would change her life forever. That week, the Bennett Grand Resort was preparing for one of its most exclusive parties, the Golden Night, an annual event reserved only for the elite of Los Angeles. Decorations were already taking over the halls: crystal chandeliers, velvet, carpets, floral arrangements with white roses and black orchids. The scent of wealth was almost tangible. Alexander Bennett walked among the organizers in his tailored black suit, adjusting details without truly caring about the party. His gaze was distant, distracted. Ever since the conference room incident, something inside him hadn't returned to its place. "You've been acting strange since that thing with the cleaning lady," said Lucas Darrow, one of the investors, smiling cynically as he lit a cigar. "Don't tell me you were impressed by an employee, Alex." Alexander looked away but said nothing. He sat in one of the armchairs on the balcony overlooking the pool, where other businessmen toasted and laughed loudly, talking about money, bets, and women as if discussing numbers. That's when the provocation came. "I bet $1,000. No staff member at this resort would dare set foot at that party, even if they were invited," Lucas said, laughing with the others. "5,000, added another. "They know they don't belong in that world. They know their place." Alexander took his glass of whiskey, swirled the liquid with indifference, and replied with disdain, "And if one of them shows up?" "Then you double the year-end bonus for the cleaning staff," Lucas challenged. "But let's be clear, no one's really going, not with a borrowed dress and the weight of the world on their shoulders." Alexander didn't find it funny, but didn't bother refusing. He simply raised his glass, looked Lucas in the eye, and said, "So be it." That same day, he sent a symbolic envelope just to provoke. Delivered discreetly by one of the assistants, the invitation reached Bella in the middle of the laundry room, among baskets of bed linens and the constant noise of machines. It was handwritten, Saturday, 8 p.m. Golden Hall, Isabella Martinez. She thought it was a mistake, then she thought it was a prank, but when she saw her full name and remembered Alexander's gaze from days before, something inside her paused. She grabbed her phone and called. Her neighbor Rosa, a retired seamstress who had known her since she was a child. "Do you still have that light lace dress you wore to your granddaughter's wedding? Are you going to a wedding, dear?" Bella was silent for a moment. "No. But I think it's time I stop running from myself. Saturday, 8 p.m. The Golden Hall shimmered. Dim lights bathed the room in sophistication. The guests, dressed in expensive outfits, mingled between mirrors and crystal glasses. Alexander moved among them with his usual indifferent expression. Inside, however, there was an inexplicable unease, as if something was about to happen. And then it did. The main doors opened, and she walked in. Isabella Martinez crossed the hall with firm, quiet steps. The pale beige lace dress highlighted her silhouette delicately, as if it had been tailor-made. Her long brown hair was loose, straight, flowing like a calm river down her back. Her makeup was subtle, but enough to reveal the natural shine of her honey-brown eyes. And her smile. Her smile was a subtle challenge to fate. The music seemed to fade. Conversation stopped. Some laughed nervously, others just watched, waiting for her to stumble. But she didn't stumble. She didn't hesitate. Alexander saw her. He stood still. The air around him grew heavy. The guests looked at him, waiting for a reaction. Maybe a joke, maybe a gesture of rejection. But he simply stared at Isabella as if witnessing a silent miracle. She walked toward him, stopped a few steps away. For a moment, no one breathed. "You didn't think I would come," she said, her voice sweet and firm. "But I did." Alexander tried to say something, but no words came out. There was something in her that none of the others there had. Courage. Lucas stepped closer, trying to stifle a laugh. "Well, looks like we have an unexpected winner." Alexander finally spoke, but not to Lucas. His eyes were locked on Isabella's, and this time his voice sounded different, more human. "You look stunning." She didn't answer, just smiled with the ease of someone who owes nothing to anyone. And in that instant, even among millionaires, jewels and champagne, she was the most powerful presence in that room. The golden hall still echoed with whispers from that night. Isabella's dress, her courage, Alexander's gaze, everything had left a mark no one could erase. But when the event ended and the spotlights faded, she simply left, took a bus alone, got off 2 blocks before home, and walked silently under the cold glow of the streetlights. Her heart was on fire, but the world around her remained the same. She was still the invisible cleaning lady to almost everyone, except him. That same night, Alexander couldn't sleep. His wide, luxurious bedroom felt smaller, suffocating. He paced back and forth, the image of Bella etched in his mind, like a painting that wouldn't fade. For the first time in years, he didn't know what to do. The next day, she returned to work as if nothing had happened, wore her worn uniform, and had her hair pulled back in a tight bun. She cleaned hallways with the same dignity as always, avoided crossing his path. But he, now, was looking for her. On the 3rd night after the ball, Bella finished her shift and took the service elevator down to store the supplies. When she stepped out of the storage room, the hallway was empty, except for him. Alexander was waiting, leaning against the wall, no suit, just a white shirt with rolled-up sleeves and dark jeans. For the first time, he looked less like a CEO and more human. "You left quickly that night," he said with a half smile. "I didn't think there was a reason to stay," she replied, her tone unchanged. "You were the only reason that party felt real at all," he said, with a sincerity she didn't expect. Bella held her breath, looked around feeling the silence, and murmured, "If you're here out of guilt, don't be. I'm used to being the punchline." Alex took a step forward. His blue-grey eyes held no arrogance, no pity. They held pain. It's not guilt. It's curiosity. It's respect. He hesitated, lowering his voice. "Something I don't know how to name yet." From that night on, something began. There were no planned dates, no promises exchanged. They just started meeting. First in the quiet garden behind the resort, then on the rooftop where no one went after hours. Sometimes he showed up with 2 coffees. Other times she brought a thermos with hibiscus tea made by her mother. At first they talked very little, but the silences said more than any words. "Don't you ever get tired of controlling everything?" she asked once, sitting beside him on a metal bench, their knees almost touching. "I'm tired all the time," he answered without hesitation. "But I pretend not to be. It's what people expect from me." She looked at him with tenderness and strength. "Maybe that's why you're always alone." He turned his face toward her. There was truth in that sentence, and care. Between small comments, quiet laughter began to appear. She challenged him with light sarcasm and sharp humor that surprised him. He listened with rare attention, as if every word she said brought him something he hadn't felt in years. One night, when he showed up with wet hair and a face marked by exhaustion, she teased, trying to look less intimidating. "Because it's working," he laughed. A real laugh, pure, almost childlike. "You scare me more than any investor meeting." Then she laughed too, lowering her eyes. They didn't touch, didn't make promises. But the meetings became routine, and routine turned into need. Isabella began to see that behind the impenetrable man was a tired, wounded heart longing for peace. Alexander, in turn, discovered that beneath the uniform and humble appearance was a woman with an entire world inside her chest, and he wanted to know it. But both knew they were walking a tightrope, because that feeling wasn't supposed to exist. What had begun as quiet and tenderness in hidden nights soon became something stronger, but also more dangerous. Alexander and Isabella continued to meet away from the world's eyes, but the world, as always, would find a way in. It happened. On a cloudy morning, when winter had just started to show itself through the windows of the Bennett Grand Resort. Bella was tidying up the 7th floor hallways when she noticed something strange. Whispers among staff, phones being checked in a rush, sideways glances. When she entered the locker room, 2 co-workers fell silent instantly. She didn't know it yet, but at that moment her name was already circulating on gossip websites and corporate scandal forums. "Is it her?" a guest whispered in the elevator. "The employee who seduced the boss," another replied, with a poisonous giggle. The headlines said it all, in big, cruel letters. Billionaire CEO involved with cleaning staff. Career at risk. Harassment or romance? Former employee accuses Alexander Bennett of inappropriate conduct. Who is Isabella Martinez, the woman behind the scandal? The images were worse. Photos taken from a distance, some clearly altered, showed Alex and Bella together on the resort terrace, in private moments that should never have been exposed. In one, he appeared to be holding her by the arm. The blurred lighting gave the scene a forced look, as if there was tension, not affection. Bella saw it all in silence, sitting on the bed of the small room she shared with her mother and sister. Her phone wouldn't stop buzzing with messages from unknown numbers, threats, insults. In just a few hours, she had gone from invisible to the target of a virtual lynching. At the Bennett Group headquarters, the situation was exploding. The company board held an emergency meeting. A former employee, fired months earlier for embezzlement, took advantage of the moment to file an old complaint that had previously been dismissed for lack of evidence. Now, with the term toxic environment trending across social media, the board demanded immediate action. "Either you step down temporarily or the company goes down with you," said one of the directors bluntly. Alexander listened in silence, his hands trembling under the table. He thought about her, what she must be going through, how much he had failed to protect her. "This is all a lie," he finally said. "You all know that." "But the world doesn't," the director replied. "And the world has already chosen who to believe." By then, Bella had already made her own decision. That night, she went to the resort one last time. She avoided being seen, walked through the empty hallways with quiet steps, never looking back. On the terrace where they had shared so many silences, she left a folded letter on the iron bench where they used to talk. It was all she could do for him. On the paper were just a few words, written in the steady handwriting of someone who loved, but knew when to leave. "Alex, I don't want to be another burden in your life. You already carry the world, and I'm just a part of it that no one wants to see. What grew between us wasn't a lie. But maybe the truth isn't enough to keep us alive. Forgive me for leaving like this, but leaving is the only way I can protect you. Bella." When Alexander found the letter, it was too late. She was already gone. No one knew where. Her phone was disconnected. Her mother's hospital line was out of service, as if she had vanished overnight. He read the letter over and over, his eyes red, his fist clenched. He tried to ignore the pain, but couldn't, because for the first time in a long time, he knew what he had lost, and now not even all the power in the world could bring her back. Time passed, but inside Alexander Bennett, the clock had stopped at that last letter. Months dragged by since Bella disappeared. The scandal cooled down, the media moved on to another target, and the Bennett Group's board finally reinstated him, but with new rules, more oversight, less freedom. He returned to his role, but not to the same place. On the outside, he was intact. On the inside, undone. He stopped going to parties, stopped smiling, no longer looked people in the eye with the same confidence. And every time he passed the resort's terrace, he felt the void of an absence no one else could name. "She saved you," his sister Julia once said, "the only one brave enough to bring it up. And you lost her trying to protect her from the very world you built." He didn't answer. He just grabbed his coat and left. He started investigating quietly. avoided official channels. He didn't want headlines or favors. He just wanted to find her. He hired a private investigator with only one rule: complete discretion. Weeks passed. Nothing. No activity on her ID number, no active bank accounts, no new address. It was as if she had turned to dust in the wind. Until one rainy afternoon, the detective left an envelope on his desk with a single printed photo. It was Bella, wearing a white apron, her hair pulled back in a messy bun, serving coffee in a small diner in Silver Lake, East Los Angeles. A simple place with worn wooden tables and a faded sign. Alexander stared at the image for a long time, eyes frozen. She looked different, thinner, more tired, but alive. There was a new strength in her, as if she had rebuilt herself from scratch. The next morning, he went there, arrived early before the crowd, watched from across the street. Bella came out the back door with bags of bread, her hair down for the first time in months. She wore a wool sweater and simple jeans, no makeup, and still, she was the most beautiful woman he had ever seen. He didn't approach. Not that day. He returned 3 more times, just to see her from a distance. Sometimes she smiled at customers, other times she stayed quiet. There was something held back in her, as if part of her light was still dimmed. On the 4th day, he decided to go in. The bell above the door gave a soft chime. She was behind the counter drying a cup. When she saw him, she froze. For a second, the world stopped. "Hi, Bella," he said, his voice rough, carefully measuring each word. "I'm not here to cause trouble." She didn't respond, just placed the cup on the counter with firmness. Her honey brown eyes locked onto his, and in that moment, all the repressed pain surfaced. "Why are you here?" she murmured, without any visible emotion. "Because it took me months to understand what I lost. And because I lied when I said I wanted to protect you. The truth is, I wanted to hide you because loving you made me feel vulnerable, and that terrified me." Bella closed her eyes for a moment. The silence between them was sharper than any word. Any word. "You destroyed the little peace I had," she said, her voice trembling. "And when everything fell apart, I was alone. I had to rebuild myself while you disappeared." Alexander stepped closer, stopping less than a meter away. There was no arrogance, no empty apology, just a man stripped of pride. "I never disappeared," he replied, his eyes wet. "I was just too much of a coward to face the world with you." She gripped the counter, trying to hold back tears. "But one escaped. I don't know if I can forgive you," she whispered. "I'm not here asking for that," he said sincerely. "I'm asking for a chance to fix what can still be saved, even if I have to start by watching you from afar, outside." The bell on the door rang again. A customer walked in. Bella looked at him for a second longer, then turned away silently to grab a notepad. But before walking away, she murmured, "Come back tomorrow, if you want coffee." And that, for Alexander, was more than a response. It was the first brick of a broken bridge. Alexander returned to the diner every morning, sat at the same table in the corner, ordered coffee, and watched Bella quietly. They exchanged few words, sometimes just glances. But what lingered between them wasn't forgetfulness. It was a living wound. Still, he waited, every day, as someone who knew that time, if respected, could become a bridge back. Meanwhile, outside that small universe, a dormant truth was starting to surface. At the headquarters of Bennett Grand Resorts, an internal investigation, quietly initiated by Julia Bennett, Alex's sister, began to uncover documents that seemed forgotten, altered contracts, erased records, archived messages. It was during one of these quiet searches that she found a recurring name, Gavin Foster, a longtime partner in the group, known for his ambition and thirst for control. That same week, a former security department employee showed up at Julia's office. He was a simple, nervous man, carrying a cardboard box full of documents and a remorseful look in his eyes. I know what they did to your brother," he said, sitting down with trembling hands. "And to the girl." Julia stared at him, unblinking. "Tell me everything." He took a deep breath. The footage, it was manipulated under direct orders from Foster. The terrace cameras were edited. The ex-employee's accusation bought. She was paid $40,000 to move forward with the complaint. The revelation struck like lightning. That same night, Julia went to Alex's house. He was alone, sitting in front of the unlit fireplace, eyes fixed on nothing. "You need to hear this," she said, handing him the recorder with the confession. Alex listened in silence. When it ended, he closed his eyes, swallowed hard, and murmured, "I knew something was off, but I gave up too quickly." "It's not too late," Julia said, "but you need to act. And you need to do it for yourself, not for the company anymore." The next day, Alexander called for an emergency meeting with the board. He sat at the head of the table like he used to, but his posture was different. He wasn't the CEO trying to reclaim his title. He was a man seeking his own dignity. "For a long time, I let image matter more than truth," he began. "But truth always finds a way to come out." He presented evidence, showed the documents, played the audio. The silence in the room was absolute. Gavin Foster tried to argue, tried to laugh it off, tried to deny it, but the evidence was irrefutable. By the end of the meeting, he was unanimously removed. The press received an official statement. Alexander Bennett was cleared. The scandal had been fabricated, and Isabella Martinez was innocent. But even with his name cleared and his power restored, Alexander did not celebrate. What he wanted, what he truly desired, couldn't be won with boardroom votes. That same night, he asked the communications team to remove all old articles, sue the websites that still hosted false stories, and protect Bella's image at all costs. Then, he went into his office, turned on a single light, grabbed a blank sheet of paper, and wrote, "Bella, today, for the first time, I face the world with an open heart. Today, I chose the truth. And the truth is, you were never my mistake. You were the most right thing that ever happened in my life. What they did to you, what we did, cannot be undone, but maybe it can be restarted. I want you to read this where no one pressures you, no one judges. I don't want cameras, spotlights, or empty promises. I just want you to know what was destroyed. I want to rebuild with my own hands, if you'll let me. Alex." After folding the letter, he called a trusted courier, asked that it be delivered directly into her hands, without explanations, without fuss. He knew she might not respond, knew she might never forgive him, but he had done his part, and sometimes the greatest act of love is to let go of your pride and simply wait. The letter was delivered. Isabella read every word with trembling hands, sitting in the back of the restaurant while a light rain fell outside. There was no perfume on the paper, no empty vows, just truth, raw, honest, real. But she didn't respond. Not yet. Alex, in turn, understood the silence. He didn't push, returned to the rhythm of corporate duties, or at least pretended to. The restructuring of Bennett Grand Resorts required constant media presence. The press now portrayed him as the CEO who overcame an internal coup, but he knew the greatest challenge wasn't in the finances, but in the heart he had left in Bella's hands. Days later, he was invited to participate in a live interview on national television, broadcast, during prime time. It would be his first public appearance since the scandal and his vindication. The studio was modern, cold, lit by spotlights and high-definition cameras. Alex wore an elegant but modest navy blue suit. His face looked thinner, his eyes more sunken. He seemed like the same man, and yet completely different. The interview began with formal questions. The journalists talked about investments, reputation, the future of the company. He answered firmly, but his gaze stayed distant, as if part of him wasn't there. Until the reporter, a seasoned woman with grey hair and a steady voice, asked a question that wasn't on the script. "Mr. Bennett, after everything you've been through, what do you consider the greatest mistake of your life?" There was a pause, long, heavy. Alex took a deep breath. He could have given a calculated response, a neutral phrase, but he didn't. There, in front of millions, he decided to stop running. He looked directly into the camera and said, "The greatest mistake of my life wasn't falling in love with someone the world judged as inferior. It was letting her go because I was afraid of losing her." The host widened her eyes. The production team went on alert, but he continued without hesitation. "Bella, if you're listening, I still love you. And if I have to spend the rest of my life proving that, then that's what I'll do." The studio fell completely silent. In thousands of homes across the country, the broadcast continued live. Comments exploded across social media. In the small Silver Lake diner, the sound of the television behind the counter was low, but just loud enough for Bella to hear his voice. She was serving a coffee when she froze. The tray almost slipped from her hands. "Bella, isn't that him on TV?" one of the customers asked. She turned slowly, her eyes fixed on the screen. And then she heard it, word for word, uncut, unfiltered. Just the man who had hurt her, exposing himself to the world for her. The tears came uncontrollably. They fell silently as she leaned on the counter, trying to breathe. It was as if time had stopped. She heard her own pain, mixed with the voice she had spent so long trying to forget. But what to do with that? Forgiveness would be easy if the pain hadn't left such deep scars. She still loved him, but trusting was another story. "Are you okay?" the manager asked, noticing her pale. Bella nodded, quickly wiping her face. "He shouldn't have done that," she murmured, "but maybe it was the only way." On the screen, Alex finished his speech, looking directly into the camera, unwavering. She turned off the TV, looked down at her hands, and for the first time in months, the silence inside her began to change its sound. The days following the interview were a whirlwind for Bella. She left early from the small apartment she rented in the back of an old house and came back late, trying to keep up the routine she had built with such effort. But now, every step was shadowed by a truth that could no longer be ignored. She had watched the live declaration, alone in the back of the diner, with trembling hands and a heart collapsing inside her chest. She had heard every word, as if it were a whispered plea spoken directly to her. Since then, she fought daily against the urge to go to him, and against the fear of what that reunion might mean. That Saturday, under a clear sky and warm breeze, Bella agreed to help her sister, Anna, at a community fair in the Echo Park neighborhood. The fair took place every first Saturday of the month and brought together local residents, independent artists, stands with organic fruits, homemade goods, and live music. It was the kind of place she loved, simple, colorful, full of real life. She wore a floral dress with wide straps. Her brown hair was loose, slightly wavy from the breeze coming off the lake, and her honey-brown eyes hid the tiredness of sleepless nights. Her smile, though kind, was restrained. She was still there, but not entirely. While she packed slices of cake for a customer, she heard a guitar playing softly and turned to look at the street musician performing a sweet, melancholic song. For a moment, she let herself get lost in it. That's when she saw him. Alexander Bennett was walking between the stands. He wore dark jeans, a gray t-shirt, and a light linen jacket. His hair was slightly messy, and his blue-gray eyes were searching for only one thing, her. When he saw her, he stopped. There was no crowd in that moment. No cameras, no flashes, no scandal, no judgment. Just him and her. Bella stood still. Her body didn't respond right away. The world around them continued. Children running, vendors shouting deals, soft music playing in the background. But between them, time seemed to slow down. He walked toward her slowly, eyes locked on hers, carrying a mix of pain, hope, and reverence. When he stopped a few steps away, his voice came out lower than expected, like someone speaking not to break the most precious silence of their life. Bella. She felt the name vibrate in her chest. She didn't know whether to cry, run, or just stand there, looking at the man who had shattered the ground beneath her feet, and at the same time had been the only one to hold her with sincerity. For a few seconds, they stared at each other. Then she gave her sister a quiet gesture, letting her know she needed a moment. Alexander waited in silence. They walked together to the quietest corner of the park, where there was a large tree with long branches swaying in the wind. The bench beneath it was empty. They sat side by side without touching. He took a deep breath, staring at the ground for a few seconds before speaking. "I didn't come to ask for forgiveness. I came because I don't know how to live with the thought of having lost you forever." She looked at him but said nothing. Her eyes were already filling. "I don't want a life without you," he continued, his voice thick with emotion. "And I don't care what people say, what they think, or what they try to destroy. Let me start over, but by your side, this time for real, with everything." She slowly ran her hands over the fabric of her dress, as if trying to control her emotions. When she finally spoke, her voice came out hoarse, filled with hurt and honesty. "You broke my heart, Alex." The sentence hit him like a stone to the chest. She took a deep breath and went on, eyes teary but steady. "But you also took care of it more than anyone ever did. When no one saw value in me, you did. When I felt invisible, you saw me. And even after everything, I still feel something I can't turn off." He extended his hand, hesitant, and let her decide. Bella looked at his hand, and after a long second of silence, she intertwined her fingers with his. It felt like coming home. They leaned into each other slowly, a small gesture, but filled with meaning. When their lips met, it was unlike anything before. There was no more fear, guilt, or doubt. There was love, whole, brave, real. Under the shadow of the tree and the gentle whisper of the wind, two broken hearts allowed themselves to put the pieces back together. Together, the reunion had been the first step, but true love, the kind that lasts, is built day by day, in details no one sees, far from flashes and headlines. Alexander and Bella chose to begin again, but this time, slowly, genuinely. Months passed since that kiss beneath the tree at the fair. Spring gave way to summer, and with it came changes. It wasn't easy, learning to trust again, making space for each other in daily life, dealing with the ghosts of a recent past. But together, they began to create a new chapter, made of quiet choices, small gestures, and a shared desire not to repeat old mistakes. Bella left her job at the diner shortly after. It wasn't an easy decision. She felt grateful for every opportunity she had there, but something inside her pulsed stronger, the desire to study, to grow, to pursue the old dream of working with spaces, colors, and light. One calm morning, with sunlight streaming through the window of the small house they now shared, she said to Alex while buttering a slice of toast, "When I was little, I used to redesign the rooms in our house in one of my mom's old notebooks. I'd move the furniture around and thought I could change the world just like that." He looked at her tenderly, resting his chin on his hand. "You still can," he said softly, "but this time, with everything you deserve." That same month, a letter arrived from the California School of Interior Design. Inside, confirmation of a full scholarship for the entire program. Bella was in shock. "I didn't apply," she murmured, staring at the papers in disbelief. Alex gave a small, almost secretive smile. "Maybe someone did it for you," he simply said. She didn't answer, but the look she gave him said everything. In the following months, they stepped away from everything that used to be noise. They rented a modest house in the Los Feliz neighborhood, surrounded by trees and quiet neighbors. It wasn't big or luxurious, but it was full of light, airy, and finally, home. The routine was simple. Bella woke up early for her classes, returning excited to share new ideas about texture, balance, and lighting. Alex cooked on his days off, and surprisingly, he was good at it. At night, they watched old movies on a small couch, shared bottles of cheap wine, and laughed at silly things. "You know you could be having lobster dinners with businessmen in Dubai, right?" she teased, lying with her head on his lap. "I'd rather have your undercooked risotto and this cheesy romantic comedy series," he replied, running his fingers through her hair. It was a life without masks. Alex no longer needed to be the untouchable man, and Bella no longer had to hide to be respected. He learned to listen. She learned to trust. And together they learned to breathe in the same rhythm. One night, while organizing books on the small shelf in the living room, she found an old envelope tucked inside one of the books. It was the letter she had left for him months before, when she walked away without looking back. She picked it up carefully, read it in silence, and then looked at him, eyes full of emotion. "I never thought you'd actually look for me," she whispered, "much less choose me." Alex hugged her from behind, resting his face against her neck. "You were the only choice I didn't have to think about. Just feel." She slowly turned to him and kissed him, with the gentleness of someone who finally knows they're exactly where they're meant to be. Time went on, and with it, the lives of Alexander and Bella became more and more intertwined through small gestures, choices, and shared silences. The past still existed, but now it was a memory that made them stronger, not a shadow chasing them. That fall, under clear skies and golden leaves lining the sidewalks of Los Angeles, Alex received an invitation to be the keynote speaker at a national event on leadership and business legacy. The auditorium was grand, in the heart of the city, packed with executives, investors, young entrepreneurs, and the press. But unlike other times, he wasn't wearing his usual armor. That night, he wasn't just the CEO of Bennett Grand Resorts. He was a man who had learned how to lose and how to love. Bella entered the auditorium before he took the stage. She wore a simple light cream dress, the same one from the night she walked across the gala hall and stopped time. Her hair was loose, her eyes focused, her posture calm. She sat quietly in the front row, and even though he didn't see her, right away her presence filled the room like the soft glow of sunset. Alexander walked on stage to polite applause. His name appeared on the screen behind him, and the first few lines were about business, innovation, and brand restructuring. He spoke with confidence, with knowledge, with experience, but when he reached the final moment, he took a deep breath, paused, and then looked directly at the audience with a different kind of light in his eyes. "For many years," he began, his voice calm and steady, "I believed leadership meant control, not showing weakness, being the coldest person in the room." He paused, letting silence fill the space. "But then I met someone who showed me that true strength isn't in what you achieve, but in what you're willing to feel without running away." The room went completely silent. Everyone waited for what would come next. "Loving someone doesn't make you smaller," he continued, looking toward the back of the room, but then his eyes dropped to the front row. "On the contrary, it reminds you of who you always wanted to be." And then he saw her and smiled. Bella, sitting there in the same simple dress from months before, returned the smile with a shine in her, eyes that said it all. She had chosen to be there, and he knew that choice meant more than any applause. Alex turned to the audience one last time. True love isn't born out of luxury. It blooms where there's courage, honesty, and a heart willing to stay. I chose mine, and I'm a better man because of it. The auditorium erupted in applause, not just for his words, but for the courage behind them. It was more than a speech. It was a testimony. After the event, as he greeted guests in the lobby, Alex felt a hand on his arm. It was Bella. They didn't speak immediately. They just looked at each other with the kind of silence that only exists between two people who truly know one another. She smiled, eyes misty. "You've always known how to speak to crowds," she said gently. "But tonight, you spoke just to me." He pulled her into a soft embrace. "It really was just for you." And there, among glass hallways, darkened cameras and people rushing by, the entire world felt small, because all that mattered was in that embrace. So, what did you think of this story? Leave your rating from 0 to 10 in the comments. I'd love to know how deeply this journey touched you. If this story moved your heart like the video, share it with someone special and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss what's next. And before you go, I've picked another emotional story that will pull you in even more. Click over there and keep traveling with me on this journey of feelings.